Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming here today. I know it's kind of a bit obscure place to find with respect to today's space track. Again, thank you. I'm Captain Andy Gibbons. I work in ASN RDA. I am a Senior Military Acquisition Advisor for ASN RDA. Right now, Dr. Brett Seidel, as that position is vacant until and then a replacement is appointed. That being said, I have the opportunity to look across the Navy, the naval force, to look across the different services in my role as essentially the programmatic, the strategic, and the technical advisor to RDA to accelerate the delivery of capability to transport or move data securely anywhere across the globe, with a specific focus on space. Not putting up satellites in space. We have a gentleman here for that who wears a Space Force / Air Force uniform. He'll be talking later today. But in particular, how do we take advantage of space? And when I say take advantage of space, I mean take advantage of military, take advantage of commercial, take advantage of any opportunity we can to get after, again, moving data securely around the globe for our warfighters. When I was in a Space Force meeting one day at a higher classification, this organization came up to brief. Their name was In-Q-Tel. I was like, well, that's a really interesting name for an organization. And it took me a while to understand what they did. And when I realized that they were actually investing in and leading the delivery of capability to the warfighter from a different perspective, I was like, hey, they're taking advantage of companies that I had been utilizing and leveraging when I was a program manager in PMWA 170 just a year prior. And I found it ironic that they were investing in companies as a venture capital firm and directing and steering how they were developing their tech. And I was trying to do the same thing from the programmatic side. And the irony was that we were both trying to get after the same end result, getting capability to the warfighter. And I said, wait a minute, we have to team up. So that was the first time that I had dealt with or started to really deal with what we call venture capital from a perspective of how do we adjust or how do we steer these technical companies to do what we want to do, but also maintain their dual use capability for them as well. Because again, we want them to make money on the commercial side. So without further ado, I asked them to come here, both Coley Lewis and Ms. Kate Baldwin, to give a presentation to explain to you what they're doing for the warfighter and for the IC. And my objective, working with ONR, with Naval X and others, and RDA, is to give the access to In-Q-Tel for the naval service as well. Because right now it is a very limited scope for the naval service to take advantage of their benefits. So I think it's going to be a huge game changer for us to be able to work with them more closely. So I always tell them I apologize for being their pitch man, but I end up being pretty much, well, their pitch man, because I want to see us working closer with them as another tool in the toolkit for our ability to deliver capability. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kate and Coley. Thank you both very much.
All right, thank you, Captain Gibbons, for that lovely introduction and for the opportunity for Kate and I to speak here today to this group here. We're excited to be here because one of the things we've kind of focused over the last several years that while we were created by the CIA over 25 years ago, our focus and our mandates across the whole national security space. We want to make sure that we can explain to as many people as we can how our services are available to help out to different mission needs. So we're going to cover quite a bit today. I'll definitely allow time for questions at the end if you want us to be more interactive than just kind of going through slides. I think that there's going to be a lot of presentations today. You're going to see a lot of that, so we want to make sure that we can make this interactive experience. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm kind of screwing with the mic a little bit. All right, wonderful. All right, so here's the general plan that Kate and I are going to go through here today. And first, we're going to give an overview of IQT, kind of describing our overall model, as well as our approach to delivering enhanced capabilities for whether it's a warfighter or for an analyst, and then our investment approach, because we kind of fit in a unique space there. While I think a lot of people kind of will bucket us as a venture capital firm, while we have one foot in the venture capital arena, we are unique and different as a 501c3 strategic investor. Navy Work Program example, we have a couple here that we've done over the last year that have proven to be create quite a bit of impact for two Navy partners that we've been working with. And then some examples of our portfolio and pipeline. So The way we look at the technology landscape is that we break it down into 5 different parts, and we'll get into a little bit later. And before we go too much into the model, I should get a little explained who Kate and I are. My name's Coley, as Captain Gibbons mentioned. We lead our growth partnerships team here. Kate and I are both in that team. And one thing we are looking to do is looking across the national security space to see where there are synergies where what In-Q-Tel does. Our lines of effort may be able to benefit different members of the DoD, the IC, as well as DHS and other critical infrastructure partners. And then Kate here obviously leads a lot of those engagements, and she's worked very closely with Navy over the last year to help execute 2 successful what we call work programs at IQT. All right, very detailed here. All right, so this is small print, so don't worry. We'll cover it piece by piece here. You never can quite tell when you create a slide. I think, oh, it looks great here, and then you get in a bigger screen, like, oh, it's not what I thought. So we'll have to make some modifications here, but I'll go through each piece here. Our mission for the last 25 years, we are established as a 501c3 strategic investor by CIA. And our focus has been to be the trusted bridge between the government, venture capital, and commercial startup companies. And what we do is, through strategic investments, leverage the global innovation startups to deliver enhanced capabilities for our national security partners. And this comes through different means of doing that. So one of which is to enhance capabilities, but it's also an information piece. Some of the biggest advantages we can provide to our national security partners is information, what emerging technologies, what our adversaries are contemplating, where they're spending their money in different companies. We can give you that insight and with our model. How do we go about doing that? We have 7 offices globally. We're headquartered in Tysons, Virginia. Our second largest office is here in Northern California in Menlo Park, California, which sits most of our investment team. We have an office in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where it's a lot of startup activity there, so we have an office there. We have 4 offices overseas. First, we opened offices in London and Sydney in 2018. And 2024, I believe, we opened our offices in Singapore and Munich. And that has given us the ability to make sure that we really are close to the ecosystem of startup companies across the globe. Before we opened offices overseas, we made about 15% of our investments were Oconus, but you'd kind of go there, you'd visit, you'd leave, and you kind of you really weren't part of the community. So by opening up offices there, really had a chance to sit down and get better in touch with the community and some of the startups that were coming up there. Government partnerships, we have 14 across the IC, DoD, and DHS, and they're really the cornerstone. Each of our partners have established a team, an interface team. So one of the gentlemen here in the audience is one of it from the Navy team, Noah Maz, right there in the front row. Won't acknowledge us. Put his hand up. There you go. They're a big part of our model working with the government partners. So and we'll get a little bit later, but they each have established a unique center where we interact with them to be kind of the front door to working with, in this case, with the Navy or another partner. There's 2 main lines of effort that In-Q-Tel spends its energy in. One is capability delivery through strategic investments. The other is through global investment outreach and insight. So the first one is that we are a strategic investor. We make about over 70 investments a year. There's 2 types of investments that In-Q-Tel makes. One is through work programs that we invest dollars to enhance capabilities. The other is equity-only investment. So when a company is young, still kind of get its feet under itself, we will invest amount of seed money into that company to help develop it out of our proceeds to make that at one point help it convert to a work program. Global investment outreach. So as we go out there and understand the commercial market, our tech and investment teams develop unique insights into what's going on there, what companies are emerging, what technologies are turning in a certain direction that we think that our government partners should be aware of. And so there's 3 different types of information we provide to our government partners. One is through technology scouting. So we meet with over 1,000 companies a year. We provide that information back over to our government partners for their review. Situation awareness. We do global competitive analyses. So we look at a certain tech space, whether it's quantum or counter UAS, and they come back and say, here's what that space looks like across the globe. Here's where China's spending their money and time and energy, and here's how we think that the U.S., what direction they're going in right now. Finally, the insights. It's a new product line that we started about 2 years ago. And what it does is it takes our situational awareness products and adds the analysis of our investment and tech team to certain areas, whether it's a bio-focused area, counter-UAS, quantum, microelectronics. Our teams take a chance to produce these, what we call insights, into areas that we think their government partners might be interested in. Now, a big part of ours is the convening power, which we've been doing for over 25 years, trying to bring together 3 unique worlds together at the same time. So from the commercial startup side, many startups we encounter, in some cases, do not really know how to work with a government. So by us investing in them, we can kind of give them access to our government partners and align to an area that's going to benefit the development of their technology. On the investor side, we have a deep tech staff, and I think a lot of the VCs that we work with really appreciate our technical diligence we put into these companies. They have a sense of confidence that this company is trending in the right direction, so we always will co-invest with a number of VCs. And on the government side, not just we're looking to develop new capabilities, technology is going to help the warfighter, but as well as provide them information that's going to help put them at an asymmetric advantage against some of our adversaries. One of the areas that In-Q-Tel takes a great amount of pride in is our diligence. And it's not just technical diligence, which we take great pride in, but there are other areas where not just with a global footprint that we have, financial diligence, as well as security diligence against a lot of the companies that we are looking at right now. While technology is important in today's world, there's also a level of, is this company going to be able to survive after 6 months? Is there any types of challenges or integrity concerns to the technology that we should be aware of? And so we take each aspect of these areas and take a good amount of time making sure that when we talk about investing in a company for one of our government partners, that they have a good level of confidence that both financially the company's going to be able to exist within 6 to 12 months, that we're going to help them chart a pathway for greater commercial success. Security-wise, we're working with CIA as well as our security team to make sure that we have a high level of confidence that the technology is not going to be compromised in any way. Technically, we have a deep team that's going to look at the range of startups in this certain area. And with 7 offices around, we have a good sense of what's happening globally.
Can I ask to jump in here?
Yes, please.
If you go back a slide, I think a lot of concerns recently, maybe not recently, but has everything to do with security. So you have the CIA backing you.
Correct.
Security.
That's correct.
It's a lot different than we see with a lot of commercial vendors, because the commercial vendors, especially the commercial vendors that are, I'll use the term, not looking to invest in the military, do military work, they don't realize the fact that they're under attack, lack of a better term, by our enemy. So can you talk to a little bit more about, how you feel more comfortable working with some of these startups because you have the CIA backing? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So as this group probably can imagine, when you invest in a number of startup companies, they have a fair amount of foreign nationals, they have other foreign investment involved, because no longer are the best startups solely domestic here, but they are across the globe. So what we want to make sure is that when we invest in these companies that CIA does a secure vetting of all the people on staff at the company to ensure that there's no individuals that could be challenging for the technology there. So before we can close any transaction, we must get a blessing of our executive agent before we can proceed forward, to making sure that there's no challenges to the technology that they can flag early on. Mind it also couples what we're doing from our own security team there. So combined, we think we have a really well covered, make sure that if the technology is going to not work, it's not because of some type of security challenge. Correct.
Coley, if I may too, I just want to echo a point here. Working with startups, right? Like you're thinking about the traditional vendor capital model, and you're thinking about taking a significant amount of risk, right, for something that can have a large amount of impact or a large amount of payoff. With that being said, we want to make sure before we do any investment that it's a smart investment and that we are being diligent on behalf of our government partners, which is why we really go deep into all 4 of these layers, right? So making sure that on a global stage, what else is out there? Where is the best-in-class technology? What are other markets doing outside of Silicon Valley or outside of the US? On the technical side, making sure that the company has feasibility, and that's where Coley alluded to our very deep bench of technical SMEs that most VCs or other strategic investors do not have. On the financial side, again, our Menlo Park office is investment professionals who have done this for their whole entire careers, looking at what is the runway of the company, who is the CEO, what sort of bandwidth do they have, does this make sense for their commercial traction, et cetera. And then the security side, which in this day and age is incredibly important. And so we, package this together in a 20, 30-page document to really outline where are we assessing the risks, but where are we also assessing the impact, so that our government partners can be informed about why they're making this decision or choosing to make this decision.
Question?
And so what is the track record for IQT? How many of the venture startups that you recommended people invest in survived? Do you have any metrics?
I don't have an exact, we've made close to 800 investments over our time frame. A number of those companies have been, those companies have been acquired over that period of time. Some are still existing. There are some that usually, I'd say that the rarity, sir, would be that during the course of a work program, which is usually a 9 to 18-month engagement where a company has gone out of business. That is something that, now whether or not they post-work program, they continue, at what level they continue, I say we have a pretty high track record there. It's a big part, because when we make an investment in a company, we have investment team members, they sit as board observers at those companies, non-voting members at that company. And they can kind of provide guidance along, as well as bringing together other potential VCs to help support the company to raise another round, put a bridge together if they're in any type of trouble there.
And just to add to that, again, working with this model, companies will get acquired, right? The things do happen to startups, but having this In-Q-Tel structure allows us to help our government partners navigate that. Also, when a company gets acquired, if we were doing a work program, a lot of times they're still able to access that technology at the new parent company, and we facilitate that transition. Speaking about track record, though, over 70% of our work programs get to what we call a pilot phase, which is we get the enhanced technology into the hands of the government partner to test, to evaluate, and to assess. And over half of our companies get to the adoption stage, which means that the government partner is procuring it, using it operationally, or able to ingest it into their future operation. So again, when you look at kind of the regular statistics from like a VC model, these are quite high. So we try to balance taking risk while also being very mindful about the risk that we are taking.
Yes. Go ahead, Noam.
Yeah, so someone from a service, I will say that from our perspective, I tend to be loud enough.
For folks online, no, you're not that loud.
Surprised. As someone who has worked with In-Q-Tel from a service perspective, I will say one of the key benefits for us in terms of identifying the best-in-breed tech and capabilities is that level of diligence where they are scouting and assessing and vetting over 1,000 companies every year. And so to have access to that is huge and really helps us in terms of expediting that best-in-breed to the fleet.
As a program manager, if you've ever done any type of contract action where you're looking at vetting all those that propose on a contract, they're doing a much deeper level analysis than we do in the government, from what I've read. And they're doing it to protect, and to make sure they're relatively successful in your investments. So what I've seen and they've showed me, I'm quite impressed by how deep they go into their assessments of these startups, which is, again, I don't think as a government, having been a program manager for many, many years, that we do as deep of a job as they do, because we tend to be a little bit more constrained in what we put out there in the bid. So I just want to say again, I think it's extremely valuable.
Thank you, Captain Gibbons. And one point I want to clarify, as a 501c3, when we make an investment, the desire is not to have a return. We're not looking to invest in unicorns. I mean, that happens, it's great. Our focus is to create impact for our partners. We'll invest in a company that really maybe will never be more than just moderately successful, but if it helps develop new capability for the warfighter, that's what we're looking to do. This is a high-level process, how we generally operate. We'll dive into that a little bit more deeper here in a second. Kate will take that portion of it. But from a high level, here's the process we go through each year with our partners. The first thing that happens is that they submit over to the executive agent a problem set. problem set is, or it can be IPLs or a set of technical gaps, usually in the range of, some submit hundreds, others submit 5 to 10. We're looking for those kind of game-changing areas that they need, that the commercial market can be able to help. That sets the focus for our tech and investment team to go out there and begin exploring what companies are in those spaces. And now, one thing too is that throughout the process of submitting the problem set, we're going to have classified discussions with our government partners to make sure we really understand the problem. An analogy that Kate often hears me say is that it's like going to the doctor and trying to be diagnosed. We need to understand really what you've tried, what has worked, what hasn't worked. We want to make sure that what technology we're looking for is going to plug a hole. We don't want to invest in a company that's going to be in conflict with one of the things that you have developed. We want to make sure that we're plugging a gap. And our approach, we'll get to a little bit later, is focused on architectures, looking at a long-term plan about where we want to build technologies together, because one investment isn't going to solve all of your problems, your technical gaps. It's going to take a series of investments over a period of time to develop a holistic solution, and we're going to try to work together, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Global exploration and diligence, and actually, Kate, you're going to cover some more depth, so I'll bypass this one here. This is actually, again, another slide that looked good in theory, but then now on a bigger screen doesn't. Small print, but what it does is we break down technology into 5 technical practice areas. Advanced systems, our bio-focused practice called BNext, cyber, enterprise, and intelligent connectivity and compute, which we refer to as IC2. We have tech staff and investment team across all these areas, and the areas you see here listed are our areas of particular focus in FY25. So we have SMEs attached to each one of these areas, which is why we have a broad group of national security partners across the IC, DoD, and DHS, and we have the skill set to match some of the challenges that they face on a routine basis. So this is kind of, now these will change as our government problem sets change each year. So this is FY25. I imagine some of these will appear in FY26, and some maybe will be different. You look at this list maybe 10 years ago, you're going to see probably a bigger focus on enterprise, on big data, when that was the thing all you heard about. Still, I think still a challenge, but it's the focus now being Gen AI and other areas there. I'm going to turn over.
What you couldn't see because of the text is, and I'm looking at folks in the audience so I know, a lot of these binned areas are everywhere the Navy and Marine Corps team are looking for capability, which is, again, that's the overlap that I saw when I saw something. I looked down there, I see GPS signal-denied capabilities. They're getting after those capabilities. And I was a program manager trying to do the same exact thing, and I wasn't leveraging what you were leveraging. So I saw that as inefficient. I mean, there's even capabilities and technologies in here, I think, to help out our shipyards, which is very unique to say that. But I mean, I was like, hey, I was thinking space, and I was thinking GPS, and there's stuff in here that we could use, not just AI and quantum, but the potential of helping out some of our bigger issues would have to do with shipbuilding. So again, I think you're kind of underselling the broad spectrum of what you're looking at technical wise, because I mean, there's like, I think I want to do bio harvesting or whatever. There's some really cool sounding stuff in there. I don't know what it means, but I'm pretty sure we can use it.
Yeah, there's one of the misnomers that's existed over recent time is that a lot of if those who are familiar with In-Q-Tel, it's IC focused, and our technology and our partners across the whole national security gamut. These areas here have applicability across DoD, DHS, and other locations, and we've had recent successes with Navy, and we're looking to kind of continue that relationship there. I'm going to turn it over to Kate to cover kind of a little bit more in depth about the capability delivery.
Awesome. Thanks, Coley. So Coley did a great job of outlining who we are and what we do. Now I'm here to talk a little bit about how we actually do that. What does the process look like? When we outlined In-Q-Tel, one of the biggest components of In-Q-Tel is this capabilities delivery. So investing in companies to tweak, modify, accelerate those companies in order to deliver capabilities to our government partners. So this is a little bit of a capabilities overview, and then we'll take it step by step to really talk about what each of these components look like. As Coley talked about, this first thing that we want to do is we want to understand our government partners' problems. It all starts there. We are a 501c3, which means that we are not motivated or driven by profit. We are investing to try to make sure that these investments generate impact for our partners. To be able to do that, we have to first meet with our partners to really understand what are your gaps, what are your technical gaps. Based off of that, so again, we work across over 14 different national security partners today. We ingest that, and then we go out into the market, and every single year, so year over year, we're talking to 1,000 new companies. But understanding the problems of our government partners is what directs us to which sort of industries, companies, technical focus areas that we're going out and we're speaking with. What we hope to ingest back or provide back to our government partners is based on the problems that they brief to us, overlaying what is currently going on in the commercial market, or I would just say now the global market. Where are those opportunities that we can help get in early to then deliver capabilities to the government that they may not already be able to access? I believe Captain Gibbons said this, Coley said this, we always say we are another tool in the toolbox. We are not the only tool, but we are trying to provide our government partners access really to some of those budding areas in the commercial market that they can get in early enough, influence the roadmap of some of these companies and the technologies, so that as these companies continue to grow, the government partners can be able to use these technologies for their use cases. So again, that's strategy and thought leadership. From there, when government partners say, yes, this is something that I want to do, we start this pre-deal process. This pre-deal process is incredibly in-depth. Again, we've been doing this for 25 years, so we know what works well, what doesn't work well, where we've had to dedicate more resources and less resources. But this pre-deal process really covers those areas of diligence that Coley had shown on one of the previous slides. So looking at everything from the financial standing of the company, to the leadership, to the technical diligence, to the security vetting as well, making sure we understand where this company sits in the market. It's not always that we're doing investments in what we believe may be the best-in-class technology, but it could be cheaper, smaller, quicker, novel, but making sure that we are clearly articulating that benefit and how it maps back to the problems that were briefed to us. Once we do that pre-deal process, and this can take anywhere from, I would say, 2 to 3 months to 6 months, depending on one of our Navy work programs. I can use it as an example. I believe we received the go-ahead or the signal that they wanted to do a work program in October, and by January we had closed it. So we can work very, very fast. But then we kick off the work program, and I'm going to go in depth about a work program a little bit further, but the work program is really this period that Coley talked about, typically 9 to 18 months, where we're customizing the technology, getting it into the hands of the warfighter, and then working to understand the customer's feedback, if this works for them, and if it does, how we can help them then have a direct relationship with the company or continue to grow that relationship in a way that the customers would like to. And we call that final piece, which is solution transfer. Yes, sir.
So from a funding perspective, the pre-deal process, the investments, ultimately the work program, is the customer providing all that funding, or do the customers providing all that funding? Okay.
Well, we're actually going to talk about that a little bit further on. For a work program, customers provide the funding for a work program. In-Q-Tel uses our proceeds to do what we call equity-only investments, which are investments that we believe can turn into work programs in the next maybe 1 to 2 years.
Okay, so you do provide some of that funding on the
We provide
pre-deal
funding, we'll talk about this a little bit
Okay.
further on, but we provide funding for equity-only deals,
Okay.
but not for the work program deals.
Work program stuff, okay. And then ultimately, when a customer wants to adopt the technology
Yeah.
and field it, do they use their own contracts to do that? And,
Yeah.
And then does this process satisfy the competition requirements to go forward?
Yeah,
Okay.
so those are all really great questions. What I'm going to say is an answer that when you work across 14 different government partners, and then within those departments and agencies, different teams and organizations have their own preferred method of doing things. And so on every single deal, work program deal that we do, we put a lot of grit and a lot of staff into that, and then we actually have on staff a government contracts expert as well. At the end of the day, we want to, after the customer gets into their hands that technology and begins to evaluate it, we want to begin to have conversations with them about what is your feedback? Is this something that you might want to ingest? And if this is, what is your preferred method of doing so that we can A, work with the company, and B, the government partner to find that right pathway. That pathway can look very, very different. One of the things we do after the conclusion of the work program is we have a full year of maintenance and support on contract with the company, where the customer has the rights to continue to evaluate the technology, and we are there as support to provide whatever resources we can. Our goal is not to stay in the middle of that relationship long term. We want to do the work program to really provide that initial footing and then allow the customers and the company to go direct. When we're going out and we're scouting all of these companies too, if a company already provides capability that could work for the government partner, we don't want to do a work program. We want to put them in, direct communication and have that direct relationship. We only really want to do a work program when there's a little bit of a gap, maybe the company's too nascent, and there's a need for that additional development of capability. So I will briefly hit on this, but we're actually going to talk about it a little bit more when we talk about our investment philosophy. But again, I mentioned every single year we talk to 1,000+ companies, and these are not the same 1,000 companies year over year. So when you think about, again, our 25, 26 years track record, we are talking to, every company out there, we are really talking to them. And Coley talked about our insights, our situational awareness products, and we really developed that because as a result of how active we were in the market and of the level of understanding that we were gaining about the global market. From those 1,000 meeting notes, we dwindle that down into about 130 companies of interest, and these are something that we call COI documents. And these are companies that we believe we've kind of done that next level of diligence, and we believe that they could be really interesting candidates for a work program. On all of those COI documents, we actually map it back to the problem sets that our customers had initially delivered. From those COIs, we hold demos, we do diligence, we have more technical in-depth discussion with our government partners. And then as a result, we do about 70 investments per year. 40 are equity-only investments that we do out of In-Q-Tel proceeds, and 30 are strategic work program investments that we do to deliver capabilities. This is a little bit of our pre-deal diligence process. I'm reiterating myself, but I'm just trying to kind of articulate again. It always starts with the problem set. It always starts with understanding what are the technical gaps, and then going out, scouting the market, and understanding what is happening in the commercial market where we can overlay that with the technical gaps. One of the examples I like to talk about is, historically, some of our partners, if you look at, the mid-2000s, they were saying we need different sensors, cameras, payloads to integrate onto aerial vehicles. And when the autonomous cars market really started to take off, you saw a huge surge in startups of capabilities in sensors and cameras and all of those capabilities. And we were able to go back to our government partners and say, hey, there's a ton of funding going on in the market right now in this area that you can take advantage of, get in early, see if we can integrate these commercial capabilities onto drones, onto aerial vehicles, and leverage that. Deal scoping, deal selection and scoping, that's kind of when we get a little bit more in depth where a government partner says, yep, we started with these 12 companies that address this problem. I think these 6 have potential, and then we have discussions to maybe dwindle it down to 1 or 2 or 3 candidates. And then deal execution, that's again all of our technical, our financial, our security diligence, and every work program we do has a statement of work, which is a contract between In-Q-Tel and the company, outlining specifically what the company will deliver on. This is an example of an In-Q-Tel work program. The bottom line that I really want to talk about here is we are trying to identify a commercial capability still early enough in its development, and through the In-Q-Tel investment, adapt that capability to meet the specific needs of the end user. What this will do is it allows our government partners to evaluate and test that technology, seeing if it can actually meet its use case, while continuing, to leverage the private sector capital going into these startups. Within a month of kicking off the work programs, we deliver the existing commercial capability to our customers. So we want to move fast. We want to make sure that they're testing it early. And then typically within 6 to 12 months, we're delivering that first enhanced prototype for evaluation and testing, and looking to deliver the final enhanced prototype or final enhanced commercial product within 12 to 18 months. The funding for our work program is going into the acceleration, the modification of the technology, receiving the services and deliverables. But again, the In-Q-Tel model is that while the company is doing that, while they're creating and generating this, they're also attracting additional private sector capital, and continuing to innovate and iterate onto that technology. And so this is important because we don't want the government to, to solely pay for the continued innovation of this technology. We want the commercial market to feel this. And so for every $1 that In-Q-Tel invests, on average, we attract an additional $40 of private sector capital. And that continues on, so that, again, at the conclusion of the work program, our government partners, while they may choose to go direct through a contract, they're able to continue to use that market and use the company as it's growing.
As a program manager and someone sitting in RDA, if you told me I could take $1 and get $40 extra on the dollar that I invested, that is an amazing return on that investment. So, I mean, I just think that's a tremendous piece of data that everyone needs to look at with respect to the possibility of using In-Q-Tel.
And
it's
that's
huge.
Yes, sir.
During the work program process, some startups say, right? Thank you, Captain. So during the work program process with a startup, for example, and you require from that company technical resources and support, does part of that process put some of those folks through the clearance process? Is that required? Number one, and can you escalate that process?
So that is a great question. What I will say is that through our model, I would say for the majority, we are trying not to have to support the clearances. We have the investment, the board observer, we have technical staff, we have engineers, and we have program manager. All of those In-Q-Tel staff are fully cleared. So we go into our government partners' buildings often and frequently to have those classified conversations and then to communicate to the startup the analogous unclassed use case. With that being said, some companies need to have clearances in order to support the work program, and in that situation, the government partner can put in a request, and we can work with the agency to try to expedite that to get them access. And then actually, just my last point on this slide, because again, Captain Gibbons brought up a really good point. This is just the 1-to-40 ratio. That's just In-Q-Tel to private sector investment. With 14 different national security partners, it is not uncommon to have multiple partners onto one work program, right? So if it's a $2 million work program and there's 4 partners, instead of one partner doing, providing all $2 million, it's $500,000 across those 4 partners. I recently pulled some data for another partner I work with, and in this last year, 60% of their deals were multi-partner deals, and for every $1 they invested, they were able to leverage $2.60 of multi-partner funding, and that's even before we factor in private sector capital. So I won't spend too much time on this slide, but this is the post-deal diligence process. So we do all of that pre-deal diligence. We kick off the work program, now what? It's good to follow the contract, but there's that current product and delivery and training. We hold, I'd say, every 3 to 4 months, technical exchange meetings, design review meetings. And this is all also based, again, every partner is different. Some partners want to be more involved throughout the course of the work program. Some partners may be deployed. They may not have a lot of bandwidth. And so we always have that meeting at the front end with the government partner about what does this look like for you? What do you want this to look like? And then we really do focus significantly on solution transfer. That is the metric, right, that we are evaluated on as a company by our board is, how frequently are we getting these enhanced technologies into the hands of our government partners, and are the government partners using, adopting, ingesting this technology? Is it having mission impact? Great. Well, now I will pass it back off to Coley to talk a little bit more about our investment approach.
Thank you, Kate. And the one, oh, yes, sir, please.
Just a quick question. Do you have metrics on the impact or, as you mentioned, right, the objectives that you're trying, I mean, obviously not financial, but anything on that you can share?
We actually, we're having to have 2 examples, sir. Later, we're going to highlight 2 work programs and the impact that they had. A metric that really matters as a nonprofit, if we're not looking for return, what is our metric? Our metric is adoption of technology. So that being procured post-work program or actually used operationally by one of our government partners. Our metric here is we've had over 500 adoptions against our 800 investments over 25 years. So about roughly, I think Kate mentioned, 40 to 50% of our technologies are adopted by our government partners. I think you mentioned about 70% are actually evaluated. So the enhanced capability that was developed during the course of that work program is used in an operation-like environment to test it out. And then what we do quarterly is we brief our board of trustees as well as our executive staff. Actually, one of our Navy work programs is coming up to brief in March to have a qualitative example of like what it did for their mission.
And I also just want to make sure that I add there into that like adoption rate. I honestly view that, it'd be great if we had 100% adoption rate. In that case, though, we probably would not be taking enough risk, right? Like we're doing this model, we're working with startups because we want to take risk in a safe way, in a way that we're being very, very mindful and explicit about the risk that we are taking, but there does need to be a degree of risk. And the other thing I want to add is sometimes mission impact is not always the government customer adopting the technology. Sometimes it's them learning that this technology does not work for me, but this technology does. Or I don't want the version 3 of this, I want the version 10, and so I need to establish XYZ with the company to be able to continue to work with them as they develop it. So that's something, again, why we really try to make sure that we are communicating very frequently with our partners to understand what are you trying to obtain out of this work program. But a lot of times, some of that mission impact is really coming from the learnings and the interaction that they're having with the company and the company's technical staff as well.
The element here that I think is important to highlight on the post-diligence side is that all of our government partners have a day job. Their day job is not to manage a startup company and making sure it delivers against the contract and that they are well prepared. One of the things we try to make it a light lift for our government partners by having a team of 4 to manage each and every work program we have. So we have about, I think at present, this may be wrong, but in the ballpark, about 150 active work programs going on right now. And we try to, as Kate showed in that post-diligence slide, is that we want to make sure that we make it a light lift. So, you guys are out there doing your job. We're going to kind of chime in and say, hey, we could use your point of view here on this one piece here. We want to make the work for them on a work program minimal, because you have other things to do right now, and it's not to obsess over this one work program. That's our responsibility to do, dedicate time and resources. So one element there we have is a project engineer. So before any hardware, software is delivered over to you for evaluation, they're going to validate against the contract that it meets the requirements and that they may notice any other red flags before it gets over to you. So the idea is when it lands on your desk or in your hands, there's a good chance it's going to work pretty quickly and be deployed successfully. We want to make that work a light for you. On the investment side, this is our general approach. So we always co-invest with other VCs. We want to leverage our private sector capital to benefit our government partners. Plus, it also displays and demonstrates that the technology has a commercial roadmap for success. We're non-controlling investors. We take a very minority position in the company. Usually, we take the exercise in the form of a warrant with most of our companies. We do take a board observership in our investments for startup companies. We take that role very seriously. Now, I'm not one of our ITMs, but I can speak working with them for years. They really want to help these startup companies, reach their goals commercially to be successful. And we're going to try to make them introductions to other VCs or provide them guidance in their experience about how to, build successfully a young company. We've kind of heard before, we invest globally, so we invest in both U.S. and non-U.S. based companies. You can see there are 2 types of investment types. One is the equity investment we mentioned earlier. We kind of referred to it in In-Q-Tel as an EO. Those come out of IQT proceeds. As a 501c3 not-for-profit, when a company does IPO or does get acquired and there's return on that investment, as a 501c3, that money is recycled back into the model. One of which way we do that is we created equity investments. This was to look at companies that are young, early stage, that are not ready to support a work program with a government partner, but really have a really promising opportunity to do so. We want to help them along the way. So these, what we also used to be referred to as seed investments, helps us monitor the company and help them out where we can and get them in a position potentially to convert to a work program. Work programs, you see in the range, they're up to $3 million on average to do a work program, usually multi-partner focused, as Kate mentioned. to leverage other government dollars outside of the private sector, but to leverage other people in the national security community. Because this won't shock anybody in this room right now, there's a lot of overlap on technical priorities. They may be said a little bit differently, but largely they are looking for the same thing. So if we can get, whether it's CIA, NSA, one of the combatant commands, Navy, to work together on a work program to drive down cost of that investment. So if you put in $500,000 into a work program, the work program's $3 million, you're getting the benefit of that other $2.5 million of other government dollars for what you get access to all the technology that they're enhancing. We kind of covered a little bit this already, so I'll kind of skip this one slide here. The investment facts and figures again. I'll kind of read it for some of the smaller print. We've made close to 800 investments since our founding in 1999. And I'd say we've kind of come to a steady state here over the last 5 years of where we roughly invest about between 70 and 75 investments a year, which looks like, if you break that down, about 30 work program investments and about 40 to 45 equity-only investments each year. We partner with over 3,000 co-investors, so we have a broad network of groups that other VCs that we work with. And then we've also made investments across more than 35 states and nearly 20 countries at this point. So it's a big part of the model to make sure that we're not just focused here domestically, but we're looking across the globe to see what else may be out there. Let's see here. I can go here. We'll go over to 2 work program examples. And now I'm going to give Kate a little bit of introduction here because she's done a wonderful job. We're leading these investments. Nomaz has been very supportive on both work programs. And again, when we say this earlier, a work program is between In-Q-Tel and the company. So we engage in a contract with the company on behalf of the government to enhance the capability and provide it over to whether it's the analyst or the warfighter to use, to evaluate, provide feedback to through the work program, and hopefully to adopt the technology for operational use and to create impact. And that's where IQT gets to seize the value. When we get to hear how this technology save lives, time, and money, that's what energizes our organization, which is mission focused on seeing ways we can do that. And these are 2 examples in real time that we've recently done with Navy. Within about a year have created some level of impact. We hope it continues to grow, and I'll turn it over to Kate to cover these.
Awesome. So we've talked a lot and we've said a lot of words. This is actually now to show the picture of what does this actually look like? What has this looked like with the Navy so far? So I'm going to highlight 2 examples here, and again, huge credit to Nomaz and his team for the work that they've put in to help us partner on these 2 work programs. The first is a company that's called SOFAR Ocean, and the challenge that we had received from our government partners was the need to provide near real-time sea state data. SOFAR has a low-cost spotter buoy that is a real-time maritime platform. And so back in July 2022, In-Q-Tel made an equity-only investment, so it's making an investment with In-Q-Tel proceeds into the company because we thought it was really interesting and had a couple key market differentiators. One being that it was 10 times lower cost than competitors, another that it was scalable for global deployment. They had 3,000 buoys worldwide, providing over 100,000 data points per day, and then it had modular hardware design using open source standards. So we did this equity-only investment to maintain connectivity to the company, to better understand what was on their commercial roadmap, see how they developed. And then about a year and a half later, so in December 2023, we did a work program investment on behalf of a Navy customer. And what this work program investment was focused on was, one, going to actually collect subsurface data. So it was collecting surface data, but now we want to collect subsurface. Adding a quick deploy and retrieve, adding data visualization, and then integrating additional data sets. And so we closed this in late December 2023. I remember this because it was right before Christmas. And then early February, we held the work program kickoff where shortly after a month, we actually went down to Virginia Beach. We delivered the current SOFAR system. These images on the right are actual images from this event and exercise. In-Q-Tel was there, the company was there, we were there hands in hands with the customer, and they were testing these out and providing real-time feedback about you have all these great instructions. I want IKEA level instructions where it's an image. this box is way too complicated when it's going to be the middle of the night and I'm throwing this overseas. Can we actually make this box into something that is part of the buoy? And so in addition to all of these enhancements that the work program was focused on, the company was able to take that feedback, modify it, and then within 6 months of the kickoff, they delivered the first enhanced product that contained the first baked wave of these enhancements, as well as additional feedback that the customers were able to go out and utilize. You know, what this is a great example of is startups are awesome to work with because they work super quick. In-Q-Tel provides a little bit of a structure to that to help guide the customers and the companies, again, to be able to do this in a quick, efficient manner. So that's the first example. And then the second example is a company called Anello Photonics. Anello is actually here today, and they are at booth 433. But Anello makes a silicon photonics fiber optical gyroscope. And so obviously the use case here, the challenge here was operating in GPS-denied environments. I know that is a global challenge. Coley talked about how problems are never really unique sometimes to our individual partners. This is one that several partners have struggled with. Anello was founded in 2018. We had a relationship with the CEO. He was a longtime Intel fellow. And so when the company was stood up, we knew that this was going to be something interesting. And by January 2020, we made our first equity-only or strategic investment into the company, again, to track what they were doing. You know, some market differentiators that we found with Anello and what was on their roadmap was A, the use of silicon photonics for the gyro, B, the fact that it was 10 times smaller and 4 to 10 times cheaper than competing technologies, and sat at a very interesting market, very interesting segment within the market that had not yet really been exploited in that middle market area. So when you're, you know, crashing drones, when the drone may not come back, you don't necessarily want to put a very high-grade inertial capability on it. So we did one equity investment, and then we actually did a follow-on equity investment because the company and the customers were not ready to embark on a work program, but we saw a lot of value in engaging with this company. And then in September 22, we closed our first work program investment, which was about a $3 million investment on behalf of another government partner, and it was taking their ground capability and accelerating the development to put it into this little tiny cube on the top right-hand corner. And then in January 2024, that's when we did a follow-on work program investment for a Navy customer. In this case, it was Task Force 59. So we closed the deal in January 2024. By August 2024, we were actually demoing the enhanced capability at the Blue Tides event, so a Navy event up in Rhode Island. And then by November 2024, we got the final product into the hands of the customer to actually test and evaluate. You know, they tested this in Bahrain, and 3 days later actually used this in operational scenarios off the coast of Aqaba. So again, this can really show the ability for us to work incredibly quickly with our Navy partners, leverage multiple lines of different costs from the equity and only investments to co-partnering on work program investments to deliver capabilities. So. And then I'm just going to check time real quick. Great. So we'll end with these slides. This was something we alluded to in the beginning, but you know, we take an architectural approach, so we look to have long-term partnerships, you know, with our government partners. A lot of times, this is just one example where our government partners will say, "Well, we need AI. We need to use AI." But this is, you know, how. This is an example of when we take in the problems, we go out into the market, we find that overlap, and say, "Okay, this is where we think is the market for AI that we can help you all with." We have slides then that actually populate all of our portfolio companies into these different areas to show where we've currently invested, as well as the pipeline companies that we're looking at or have equity-only investments in. And then these are just two examples of potential work programs that we've worked with customers on, interesting technology areas, and I think very relevant to the current environment we live in today. Oxide's an example of a high-performance computing infrastructure for on-premise data centers. So providing a cloud-like server solution, vendor-agnostic, open software stack, but this provides resiliency, security, and scalability for on-prem environments for our government customers. So again, this company is early on, so we've talked about, you know, what are additional work program enhancements that our government partners would need to actually be able to ingest and use this. And then Armada is another example. This is a really interesting one where they deliver modular data centers and edge device management for remote environments. So quite applicable to our government partners. The impact there that we'd be looking at is providing AI-powered analytics and predictive tools for operational efficiency in remote locations. And I just want to conclude kind of with one more plug where I know we do have a couple different In-Q-Tel portfolio companies here today in addition to Anello. So Hidden Level is an equity-only investment that we have. They're actually doing a demo this afternoon. They're a counter-UAS company. And then Second Front is an active investment that we have. They are a cybersecurity company, and they are also here today, I believe, also doing a demo this afternoon. There's probably way more In-Q-Tel portfolio companies here that I'm just not mentioning. So if you are a Portco, please introduce yourself.
Let's show with one more slide here to close with. I think it's
The next one, I think.
Is it? No, I'll go this. Here it is. This one here. Really quickly here. It's kind of putting a bow on our talk this morning. It's been like this kind of holistically looks at when you partner with In-Q-Tel, this is the products and services that you're getting when you work with us. And it begins each year, as we kind of discussed, understanding what the problems are you have, sitting with you in your spaces, working closely with you. This is not a situation where IQT invests in a company and you kind of throw the technology over the wall and say, well, good luck and hope it works out for you. This is an experience where you're working very hand in hand with us throughout the process of it, learning what you're trying to achieve, what are your technical gaps that you have, then talking through potential solutions in your spaces with you and seeing like what would be potentially the best fit for you. And as very agnostic to the company, we're looking for solutions, not looking at this company, we're trying to cram that into a problem, looking to see what's out there we can help solve. Not just that, we make an investment, you're also receiving a fair amount of, whether it's technology scouting, awareness products, insights products, that hopefully to get that information will also give you an advantage in your mission, not just a new capability that we're working to develop with you. And again, we're here for the long haul. We're not looking to make a quick investment and say, we're going to try to tell you our team, that we have witnessed it before where they'll tell our partner, like, hey, we're looking for this, and they're like, this company's not it. This is really, this is what we think really would be best for you. So we're going to be an honest broker and working with you, and hopefully you'd expand our partnership with the Navy. So, for other questions or on?
Okay. So I just want to highlight a couple things, amplify a few things. So you saw two of the work programs for the Navy. When you consider the timelines on that, from the moment we had an SOW and the work program established, in one case, product in the hands of the warfighter inside of 7 to 8 months. In the other, and that capability has already been out to theater. In the other case, it was product in the hands of the warfighter for experimentation and assessment to do exactly what Kate highlighted earlier, which is assess if the performance meets the needs. So it's not a done deal for the warfighter. It really just facilitates and expedites that capability assessment for the warfighter. One that has not been a work program, but I do want to highlight is Armada was touched on. Armada was introduced to the Navy through In-Q-Tel. We have pursued a cooperative research and development agreement, or a CRADA, in order to pursue that on behalf of the fleet. So introduced to us as another capability, and in that case, a capability that directly speaks to the CNO's Project 33 in terms of fighting from the Mach. So it's been a great partnership for us. We're looking to expand it, as Captain Gibbons highlighted, to really broaden the aperture for this partnership across the entire Navy enterprise.
Any other questions?
So, hey, I love it Noam said Project 33. So sitting in the building in the Pentagon for the first time in my 31-year career, it's real exciting when you're in the Pentagon and you're listening to the CNO, you're listening to the Secretary of the Navy talk about the fact that we've got to be ready in the 2027 timeframe. And I look at a concept like In-Q-Tel as a dyed-in-the-wool freaking acquisition guy that has been doing it for 27 years, from shipyards to space, every single platform. This is hard for program managers to understand, to be very blunt, because we were not trained this way to consider venture capital, to consider developing with commercial entities you know, and leaving a lot of the trust into a firm like In-Q-Tel. But what really struck me as amazing was when they told me that 32 of your work programs today are being used by the IC in Ukraine. I guarantee you in this room and in naval service that we could use probably 75% of those capabilities, and we don't have access to them until we get more in line with In-Q-Tel, until I do more work in RDA to make sure that we open up this aperture to the acquisition establishment. And one of the issues I find as a concern is that how many an LO capability, how many of those boxes were built for GPS? Do you know how many?
The 3 were delivered in the work program.
So we have a, Dr. Extra, we have a GPS capability out there right now that's being leveraged by the fleet because they can't wait. And they're finding ways to get the capability, and man, do I applaud them. Because acquisition, whether it's a resource sponsor, the acquisition, or whomever, are not fast enough. By allowing us to have this access to In-Q-Tel, what I also have a visualization over a strategy of is we have program managers that can get after the capabilities that they're talking about here, team with them properly, and most importantly, home those products back to a program office, right? Because what I don't like to see is a lot of these great capabilities put out into the fleet, being used by the fleet, being depended upon by the warfighter, but then what happens 1, 2, 3 years down the road? They've got to go somewhere, right? So again, there's a lot of benefits here because like they said, they don't walk away, but at the same time, what we see the value in this, I work a lot with Noam, is the fact that we get access to In-Q-Tel and this teaming that the CIA has created, the intel community, then we are the IC, then we can actually have another tool in the toolkit for our PMs. So again, we have life cycle sustainment for these capabilities as well, and we continue to build on it. So again, on the pitch man again, I keep saying it this way, because this is a different way of thinking that I have not been trained to think like for the last, again, 26, 27 years in hardcore acquisition. And I think this is what we need, because again, we have a short amount of time remaining for us to be prepared. And we got to get after thinking this way as well, on top of everything else we do. So any other questions for anybody here? Mr. Jew?
So I've been working at S&T for quite some years, and venture capital is unfortunately looked down upon by the SBA and such. In fact, sometimes they call it the vulture capital list. And we've seen VCs do lots of bad things. So I'll just leave it at that. But In-Q-Tel seems very different. What are you doing in terms of policy to fix this perception that the Small Business Administration have of VCs? And as you know, SBIRs and such, if you check that the VC box, that makes it somewhat difficult to award contracts to you.
I can take a stab at this and then I can pass it off to Coley. I think one thing to clarify is while we have almost a venture capital model, taking equity investments into companies, we are not a venture capital firm. We are a strategic investor and we are a 501c3. And we were stood up 25 years ago with that intention for the exact reason that if you're going out and you're investing to make return on investments in these companies, how you perceive what you're going to do for investments, you're going to have a different lens. Our investment philosophy is, again, what is mission impact? And that can go back to best-in-class technology, cheaper, smaller, what that is. But that is how we're evaluated at the end of the day. And that is what drives our investment philosophy. And so while we partner with other venture capital firms to leverage capital, we have that model that allows us to take the equity stakes. We are not a venture capital firm at the end of the day. We're a strategic investor on behalf of the U.S. government.
And that's well said, Kate. And there are a couple examples of which where as long as a company we feel is going to financially exist and be able to deliver a capability to our government partner, we will proceed with an investment in that company. Because if they, the government says, hey, this is going to have significant impact to their mission, I can think of multiple examples where the company itself is, doing fine financially. So our focus is say, hey, this is what it could do for us, and it's presented to our leadership, and they like, let's do it. And that's really what it comes down to. If we look back, our board and our leadership is not assessing us based on how our companies did. They're assessing us against how we're doing for our government partners. Now, we want our companies, to be successful. That's how we attract some tier 1 startups. But at the end of the day, it comes focused on the mission. And I encourage anyone here, if you're in Tyson's, to give us a call, listening, or come by and stop by. But you get the sense of when you're in our building all of the mission, the focus is looking at how can we find new ways, over our models have even evolved. So Bill, to your question also is, when we first started, we made, I don't want to say quote this, but 9 to 10 investments maybe a year. And that was the core of it. Fast forward 25 years, we're making over 70 a year. We've opened up an insights product line, equity-only investments. At one point, we had IQT Labs, which was about 4 independent groups of people doing work to do. Now it's now modified to do rapid prototyping. So even when we do turn a proceed from one of those investments, we're finding ways that could benefit the government mission. And what does that look like? It's changed. At one point, we had a big data lab. But now a rapid prototyping group is focused on taking open source technologies and delivering a prototype here in 3 months. So that's how we can help the government is going to be constantly changing.
Strategic investor on behalf of the United States government. That's what you do. I love it. That's a better way of saying it. So thanks for that, Kate. Sir, question?
So I'm a VC from Virginia, Blue Ventures. Obviously, when we invest in a company, it cannot be because they are a government-focused organization, particularly defense, right? So I see this program mainly as maybe helping the customer to get additional funding. Many of our company, we have 70 active investment. Many of our company got AFWorks, and it's very popular. This, I have lost track with In-Q-Tel. So it looks to me that if we have Navy customer, we have some companies, customer may, but a lot of time they focus on warfighting, right, mission. They don't want to do R&D. And how would you introduce the work program to a Navy program office? Focus, their money is O&M, not RDT&E, and say, hey, this work program could help them accelerate deployment or add new capability. I would like to know how I can introduce this to our portfolio companies and their customers.
Yeah, so I'll take a stab at it and then pass to Coley for any additional comments. But going back to one of our earlier slides, it starts with the problem sets. So any government customer, they put funding on contract each year, right? So a designated amount of funding, and then they deliver to us their problem sets. And we use that to go out and to find the companies and to say, hey, company A, B, and C address this GPS denied, problem that you identified. And then they would say, yeah, I'm interested in potentially engaging with these, 1 or 2 companies. So it's coming, the problems that it starts with the designated amount of funding, then the identification of the problems, and then based on the identification of the problems, that's what we're going back to them with, to say, these are companies that exist that are out there that may address the problems you deliver to us to engage in a work program with.
Sir, I'm sorry I came in here late. Which organization you're with?
ASNRDA.
ONR or? Great to have a landing point because some of our
Yeah, that's one thing here too, is that, and I want to be cognizant of the people behind us, but we're in the area of ready soon technology. So it's not like when we engage with a company, while we try to incubate companies that are equity-only investments that we make in companies, so it's not work program focused, but the ones that are work program focused, they have a prototype and or a commercial product that is ready available. So when we're talking to make enhancements to it, we're taking 2 or 3 different areas, whether we want to change the size of it, we want to focus on a different power element to it that we can hopefully accelerate development in 6 months to have something in your hands for operations. So there's also sometimes a misconception that we're basically beginning from scratch and building a product that will take 2 or 3, 4 years to develop. It's more of the range of 6 to 12 months where you're going to have something, depending on what the technology is, so there's a range there they can move pretty quickly against.
Awesome. Well, I don't want to take, we don't want to cut into the next presentation, so thank you all so much for your time today.
Thank you guys. You guys are fantastic. We appreciate that so much.